All right. Hey guys, welcome to my presentation. I'll be talking about mass incarceration in the United States of America. Specifically, we'll be talking about the causes, the effects, the consequences, how to fix the problem. All right. So, what is mass incarceration? Mass incarceration is the rate in which the United States incarcerates people. It is currently, and it has been for a really long time, it is higher than any other country in the world. Now, why is this an important issue? There are mental health impacts, there are physical health impacts, causes high recidivism rates, which equal more crime, which equals more incarceration. So it's like a loop, like it's just going in a circle. It also impacts communities, families, individuals, all of that. So, what are some of the causes of mass incarceration? There are tough on crime laws, which they're arresting people for very nonviolent crimes, giving them a long sentence. The war on drugs and inequality. So you can see here the prison system growth about 1988, 1984. It spiked. It went up really, really high in the next 20 years, 30 years. And in 2008, you can see it hit the very high, the very high. It's 1.6 million. So what contributes, my fault, to mass incarceration? So private prisons are profiting off of incarcerating individuals. There are longer sentences, mandatory minimum sentencing. There are strict punishment for nonviolent offenders, which goes back to this tough on crime laws. And there's also three strikes laws, which mandate which gives a mandated sentence after a third felony, which is typically 25 years to life. So mass incarceration and the war on drugs. The war on drugs was one of the biggest things that fueled mass incarceration. So with the war on drugs came mandatory minimum sentencing, which I talked about in this last slide. So mandatory minimum sentencing, it requires judge to give offenders a sentence of a minimum for a specific offense. And you can see here, President Nixon declared a war on drugs in 1971. So you can see right here is where when he declared that war on drugs. And this chart is just for male incarceration rates per 100,000 population. You can see here in 2010, 2008, it spiked because of the war on drugs. They were targeting individuals, specific groups were targeted. So we're going to get into that next. So we got race and mass incarceration. Racial identities and race, it fueled mass incarceration as well. So if we look at it, in 2022, Black people were incarcerated over 4 times the rate of white people. And also, these individuals had served longer time in jails and prisons for similar crimes when they were compared to white people who had committed the same crimes. So mass incarceration, it's had a huge impact on communities of color. Families, they've been torn apart, and now these communities live in fear of being incarcerated. So what are some of the consequences and effects of mass incarceration? So mass incarceration has made poverty rates spike, they're steadily going up. There are issues with convicted felons obtaining jobs and housing after being released, mental health issues, obviously, and higher recidivism rates. So the higher recidivism rates can go back to this second issue right here. Because if you get out of prison, you can't find a job, you can't get housing. What would you rather do? Would you rather live on the streets, or would you go back to prison where you know that you have a bed and food? Which one would it be? So, the answer is pretty obvious. So that is fueling. So, there have been crime reduction practices. They have not been very effective. So some of the crime reduction practices that have been initiated were drug prevention classes. They were not effective. You can't really scare people out of using drugs. I think an alternative to these drug prevention class is drug awareness classes. Instead of saying, no, you can't do this, just talk about what drugs can do to you, the consequences of using drugs. Yeah. So strict drug laws, that was another crime reduction practice. They're not effective. It only fuels mass incarceration. So more and more people getting locked up for drugs, more and more people in the prisons. And also there's unstructured rehab programs. They're not effective because obviously they're not structured. They're giving no help to these people that are incarcerated. So what are some solutions for mass incarceration? We need to reform sentences. So nonviolent offenders should not be serving the same time or more than someone who has, say, committed homicide. So we need to reform some sentences. We need to find alternatives to incarceration, which some of the alternatives can be rehab programs that are structured. If these programs are structured, they're more likely to help the individual with addiction. And then also programs to help offenders reintegrate into society, which this can lower the recidivism rates, because if they have a program that helps them reintegrate into society, they're more likely to be able to find housing, find job. They'll have the resources that they need. They have someone to advocate for them reintegrating into society. Therefore, they won't have to do this last resort where they're like, I want to go back to prison because I know I have a bed and food there. What are some barriers to fixing mass incarceration? So institutionalized racism. The whole entire United States government, there are racist policies and practices stemming back from as early as early 1900s, 1800s. Another one is prison profits. If these private prisons are profiting off of incarceration, mass incarceration, then what do you think they're going to want to do? They're going to want to lock more people up so they have more profits. It is a capitalistic world, capitalistic country, and people just thrive on the profit. And also professionals, they're resisting the reversal of mass incarceration. By professionals, I mean anyone in the criminal justice system. They're resisting the reversal. So in order to initiate this, then you have to have all hands on board, all hands ready. So the public opinion plays a big role in mass incarceration. It correlates with the support for changing policies and support for rehabilitative policies. So the public opinion, it needs to change to reverse mass incarceration because this public opinion has a huge influence on society. All right, so let's compare some of the prison population in the United States versus other countries. So you can see here incarceration rates per 100,000 population in the United States. It is going off of the chart with 716. And in second place, it is the United Kingdom with 147. The United States is crushing the United Kingdom, and not in a good way, by about 4 times the amount, just because of all of these things that have led up to mass incarceration. What can I do to help mass incarceration? You might think that you, just as an individual, can't do anything. The world is so big, there's so many people, just one person won't have an effect, but it will. So advocating for ending racial injustice in the criminal justice system is a very big thing that we can do to help mass incarceration. We see it all over the news and stuff. We see police brutality. All of that is fueling to mass incarceration because it is based on these racial injustices. You can vote for your state senators, vote for your presidents, vote for anyone that is in office, because that is where the power lies. The power lies in these that have these higher up positions. And also sentencingproject.org has a bunch of things you can fill out, a bunch of, I forget what they're called, where you sign and it reverses something, they can take it to court. But they have a bunch of those in regards to incarceration, mass incarceration, people being sentenced. I know there's one up right now about people that were released during COVID and having to go back. But yeah, it might not seem like one person can do much, but if we get just one person, a bunch of one people, that will do a lot. So we have to work together to help mass incarceration. And that was the end of my presentation. I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys learned something new. Let me know if you have any comments. Let me know if you have any questions. I am here to answer them. It was a pleasure. See you later.